All right. Thank you, John and Daniel. So, all right. Yeah, it's good. It's good to be back and to bring this lesson to you this morning. It's it's a bit of more of like a bit of a history and share my recent trip to Turkey as well. So it's hopefully it's interesting. Now, yeah, I wanted to talk about this because I thought I actually went to Ephesus, so I thought I might as well share it with you. Now, and all the pictures you see are pictures I took while I was there. So this one actually is a bit fake because this isn't actually Ephesus, all right? So this is actually another set of ruins, which is Hierapolis, which is also a big ruin in Turkey. And this is one of the amphitheaters. Ephesus actually had the biggest one, but it was closed for renovations. I couldn't take a picture for that, so I'm showing you the amphitheater in Hierapolis instead. Okay, it's an amazing place. Uh, um, Going there and walking in those streets. So Ephesus, I'll give you guys a bit of background now. I'm going to show you a bit of where it stands so that you understand when we look at that passage in Revelation and we look at the significance of where all of this lies in the Bible and how it applies to us actually. So that's my goal this morning. So actually Ephesus was settled by Ionian Greeks. Okay, there are actually three different groups of Greeks, but the Ionians came in the 10th century BC. So that's 3,000 years ago. Okay, that's a long time ago. And then it was taken over by the Romans after 1,000 years, 129 BC, and it became the second most important city in the Roman Empire. So after Rome, okay, so it shows you how important that is because it's like in Australia terms, it became like Melbourne, right? Like Melbourne relative to Sydney. Although, yeah, and then basically it was the capital of Asia Minor, which was the whole side. There are different estimates of population. I mean, 70 to 100,000 is the latest. Some people say it used to be 200,000 plus, but depends on how you calculate because it's hard to know, right? It's 2,000 years ago. Regardless, it was one of the largest cities of that time. And ultimately, it was abandoned in the 15th century. And we'll talk a bit about that because Ephesus is a port city. If you look, this is the journeys of Paul. So you can see that, Jerusalem is in here somewhere, but maybe it's blocked by this. Yeah, it is blocked by blocked by that. It's down here somewhere. Just have a bit of cough. So you remember Paul came from Tarsus, okay? So Tarsus over there. And on his third journey, he went to Ephesus. Now you can see Ephesus by the coast over there. Nowadays, if you go to Ephesus, it's about 9 or 10 kilometers from the coast. Okay, it's actually gone inland. And that was one of the reasons why it was abandoned in the end, because you can't be a port city if you don't have a port, right? So it didn't quite work out for them, but they didn't have the technology to dredge and keep it going. But Ephesus was an important city. I mean, Paul stayed in Ephesus for 3 years, and we got a lot of important events that happened in Ephesus. He wrote the book of I'll show it after. He wrote the book of First Corinthians while he was in Ephesus. Then he actually wrote the book of Ephesians while he was in Rome. Okay, but it showed that he had a real connection to that city. And you can see actually this is Turkey. All right, I'll show you the map next. So this is a map of Turkey. We went to Istanbul over there, and then we went to Goreme, which is over here, which is Cappadocia, which is in that area. And that's a beautiful place as well. That's Syria down here. We didn't want to go near there because at that time the rebels were kicking Bashar al-Assad out, so we weren't going to go there. And Izmir, which is actually Smyrna, it's over here. The third largest city in Turkey right now. They changed the name after they kicked the Greeks out, but anyway, that's a different story. And Ephesus is down here, okay? So, as I said earlier, Paul lived in Ephesus between 52 and 54 AD. He wrote First Corinthians, and then he wrote Ephesians. And interestingly, John, you know, the Apostle John, the only one who died a natural death, before he went to, I think, was this after Patmos? Must be. He wrote it's thought that he died in Ephesus in 98 AD. Okay, that's by historical records. We don't know if that's necessarily true, but that's what the scholars have said. And they thought the Gospel of John was written in Ephesus. And there is a legend that John took Mary, who was the mother of Jesus, to go live in Ephesus. Okay, so we actually went to all these places, and it's very interesting. So I'll just show you a little bit about that. Now that's us when we landed in Smyrna. That was one of our meals there. Now Smyrna, which is now called Izmir, has survived to this day. If you look at in Book of Revelations, right after the letter to the church of Ephesus is the church of Smyrna. Okay, so we went there. Second largest city. It's a huge city, 3+ million. It had the most Greeks in that city, so it's actually like going to Greece, kind of, except they kicked all the Greeks out. There was a population exchange in 1923. They still talk about it today. Actually, they kicked out 800,000 Greeks. They sent them back to Greece, and Greece kicked out 1.2 million Turks, and they sent them back to Turkey. And that's actually, I mean, they were enemies, so that was not a good thing. But anyway, it's 80 kilometers north of Ephesus. So that's a picture of Smyrna or Izmir. That's where we were staying. It's a port city. Okay, it's one of the largest ports in Turkey now, and it's got a beautiful coast. We were staying in that hotel over there, right by this plaza, which is the plaza of Ataturk, who was the leader of the independence fight in Turkey. So that's another story. So if you just to remind you guys, that's the letter to the church at Smyrna, which is Izmir. They were one of the churches which were praised. All right, they were not condemned. They were among the 7 churches. It was one of those that were praised. Most of the others had some problems, but this one was praised. You know, I know your tribulation and your poverty. You're rich, but the slander of those who say that they are Jews and are not, and synagogue of Satan, do not fear what you're about to suffer. Behold, the devil is about to throw you into prison. You may be tested, and for 10 days you have tribulation. Be faithful unto death. I'll give you the crown of life. I mean, we won't go further into that, but it does have a big place in history as well. So when we got to Ephesus, when we got to Izmir, it's a day trip to get to Ephesus. So one of the places they always take you is this place, which is just on the hill. So Ephesus is in a valley. All right, it's a port in a valley, and there's 2 hills on either side. So on top of one of the hills, outside of the city, it's about 4 kilometers outside the city, is where they thought Mary was living. Because at that time, Christians were persecuted, so they didn't want to live too close to the city where they can be captured or tortured or whatever. So they built a little house for her up in the hill. And, you know, it's a bit of a trek into the city, actually. But this is the little house that they found. Sorry. This is the little house that they found. And inside, we couldn't take pictures inside. So there were all these gifts from different popes. It's more of a Catholic tradition thing. But it was an interesting place to start. And as with a lot of Catholic things, you've got this little spring that is said to give you long life. All right, I don't know. I tried a little bit. It didn't work on me, I don't think. But yeah, I think Karen was going in for a try, but yeah. Okay, so that was on the hill, and so this is actually coming into Ephesus now. Ephesus, if you think about it, with a city like that, it actually stretches out like it's a huge area. It's like if you imagine Adelaide went to ruins, and you walked into the city, it's a huge place. But Roman cities at that time had a certain structure. They always had a bathhouse on one at the entrance, so that they didn't have really good healthcare. So the idea was if you had a good clean bath, at least you get rid of all the diseases. Okay, so that was the idea. So at the entrance of the city, you got the bathhouses, and this was at the start of one of the bathhouses at the entrance to Ephesus. And this is just a picture to show you. It's like it's hard to express it. Like when you're there, it's like it's this giant empty plain with like rocks and ruins all around. All right, they say it's about 300 hectares, so it's huge. Again, they've restored some of it, so they find all these little chunks and then they try and piece it together like a jigsaw puzzle. Okay, and then they reconstruct some areas. So this one is just a small amphitheater. This was actually the Senate. In those days, they used to have a little Senate, and this sits about 1,500 people. And the speaker, we tried it out, okay? The acoustics are really good. Like if you stand here and you say something quietly, everybody up here can hear you just from the structure of it. It was actually quite fun. Yeah, this was just after the bathhouse. And then as you walk down the street, now who knows what this is? This was one of the goddesses. It's actually, you can see the kind of shape, it's actually Nike, all right? So it was a kind of a goddess of victory. So that's where Nike came from. That's just as an aside. And outside some of the shops on the side of the road, I mean, these are luxury shops. You can see these mosaics, and it's like amazing to think that they're 2,000 years old. Okay, so it's truly quite remarkable that these mosaics have kind of survived to this day. One of our favorite spots were these, and there's like 30 of them in a square. So it was a communal activity, all right, because and they told us it was quite interesting. So everybody would sit there and they would have a chat, and they would have to send slaves to clean at the bottom, right? That was a tough job, but worse still, they used to send slaves to eavesdrop. So they would have to sit down there and listen in on the conversation. And that just keep your mouth shut, I think. That's all I can say for those poor slaves. All right, but it was a very interesting thing to see. Yeah, so we're very lucky. We've got doors and separations. Last time, everyone just took it easy and just line up, go on in there. All right, so that was cool. So this was one of the restored temples. The temple to Hadrian, who was one of the emperors of Rome. I mean, it's amazing. Like if you look at the quality of the craftsmanship, you can't get that now. Like, I don't think there's anyone nowadays who you pay however much money to sculpture that they can do such fine work. And this is the library of Celsus, the second largest library in the ancient world. They had like 12,000 scrolls. It's a 2-story building. You can't really see the scale because you're blocking the little person. Let me just move this thing for a sec. See the little person there, and that's how big this thing is. All right, so you can kind of see it's huge. And right outside Ephesus is this temple to Artemis or Diana. It's one of the ancient seven wonders of the world. I mean, you can see the scale. They used to have 127 of these columns. It's a huge temple, but now just that one left standing, and the rest are like in ruins. And on the hill behind it, there is actually the ruins of the Basilica of Saint John, which they built apparently on the tomb of John the Apostle. This is just a scale model of this. It was completely destroyed. There's nothing left, but there were some ruins, and I took this picture of the baptismal. I thought that's cool. The water was really green. If you were baptized in there, I'm not sure how long you have to live, but at least you go to heaven straight away after that. But anyway, it was a very interesting place. I had to take a picture of that because maybe we'll build one in the floor here. But anyway, that was interesting. So so we'll just look at that passage again in Revelation chapter 2, 1-7. To the angel of the church in Ephesus, write the words of him who holds the 7 stars in his right hand, walks among the 7 golden lampstands. I know your works, your toil, and your patient endurance, how you cannot bear those who are evil, but I've tested those who call themselves apostles and are not, and found them to be false. I know you are enduring patiently and bearing up for my name's sake, and you have not grown weary. But I have this against you, you have abandoned the love you had at first. Remember, therefore, from where you have fallen, repent and do the works you did at first. If not, I'll come to you and remove your lampstand from its place unless you repent. Yet this you have, you hate the works of the Nicolaitans, which I also hate. He who has an ear, let him hear what the Spirit says to the churches. Okay, so this was the first church that was addressed in Revelation. What did the church in Ephesus do that was right? I think we can see that their work they worked hard, and they were doctrinally sound. You know, Paul spent 3 years there, and when he left in Acts 20, 29, 31, he warned them particularly about being doctrinally sound. I mean, he told the elders at that time, I know that after my departure, fierce wolves will come in among you, not sparing the flock, but from among your own selves will rise men speaking twisted things to draw away the disciples after them. Therefore, be alert, remembering that for 3 years I did not cease night or day to admonish everyone with tears. So clearly they listened to him, right? They'd done what he had asked them to do. They kept working, and they kept themselves doctrinally sound. And in fact, you know, Galatians 6, 9, 10, let's not grow weary of doing good, for in due season we will reap if we do not give up. So then, as we have opportunity, let's do good to everyone, especially to those who have the household of faith. I mean, if you think about it, one of the things that they did well, which we don't do as well in society today, is a lack of patience and endurance. I think this is actually a huge thing today. And we have very short attention spans. Like if you don't win in 5 minutes, I think it's too hard. Let's just give up. And I noticed that even at work, nowadays, if people think that I'm not progressing, or I'm having a rough day, I'll just quit. You know, like it's all too hard. Let's just give up. I think that's an important lesson for us to learn. Like just persevere and keep going for a while, because if you're doing good and you don't give up, you will reap the rewards of it. Okay, so that's a very important lesson, and that applies to, you know, that series in investing that I spoke about. Like sometimes you have good years and bad years, and you may not find success immediately, but it's important for us not to grow weary or to give up. But where did the church in Ephesus fail? They abandoned the love they had at first. Now, different people argue what that love refers to, but I mean, it's easy to just understand it as love in general. Maybe the care and concern they had for each other, the warmth in the church. I think one of the great things in church is the care and concern we have for each other. Love is not just an emotion. And I think like in marriage or in any relationship, like even as a parent, there are days you just want to chuck your kids into the dustbin, but you don't, right? Because it's more than just an emotion. It's a responsibility, it's a duty, it's a sacrifice, a commitment. And that applies to any relationship that you have. All right, so we shouldn't chuck our kids in the dustbin. Just as God would many times wanted to chuck the Israelites into the dustbin, right? And Moses had to ask him not to show forbearance and love. So love is not simply an emotion, but an effort and a work, okay? So we shouldn't let mundane issues or problems crowd out our love for God and each other, okay? Sometimes people will have disagreements or issues, but you should always persevere, be patient, and forbearing. And I think that's where we can learn from this church in Ephesus, to work on that. What did they have to do? I think the first thing is to recognize that maybe they need to improve on that, to remember from where they have fallen. Okay, like it's just like the prodigal son in Luke chapter 15, when he went off and was feeding the pigs, having a rough time. He finally remembered. He came to himself and he said, how many of my father's hired servants have more than enough bread, but I perish here with hunger? We in our own lives, we need to recognize when we fall short, when we have issues, and we need to accept that we sometimes have to change. For us, actually, we are blessed. We have many opportunities here to serve and to develop relationships with each other. Unfortunately, we don't have church lunch today, but we normally do it every first Sunday of the month. Everyone hopefully can stay for that. It's always a great time. And we should always remember to pray and encourage one another as best we can. Just an extra point, there was a question, who were the Nicolaitans? Revelations 2:14 and 15 actually explain some of it. There were people who were happy to eat food sacrificed to idols and had practiced sexual immorality. And that was obviously part of the teaching of Nicolaitans. We don't know exactly, but that's the assumption. So clearly they were very hedonistic, okay? They believed in immorality, physical pleasure, and that ties in very well with modern day world, right? Like that's actually, you could argue everybody nowadays, the secular world are Nicolaitans, essentially. They emphasize short-termism. They don't look at spiritual matters or things that are eternal. And I do think that that's led to people are kind of recognizing that. So there has been a shift towards a more back to spiritual matters. I suspect I kind of feel that in the media and in the way things are being spoken about in general now. So hopefully it's a big shift back to the values of the Bible and Christianity. So just to close, what are the lessons from Ephesus? I think it's an important reminder for the church. At the core of it, we should always practice love. We should develop our relationship with God and each other. We need to continue to walk and live a godly life just as they did. To persevere, be patient, to continue to not grow weary while doing good, and to keep being aware of where we stand doctrinally, to always be aware of that, but not let that necessarily supersede or overshadow the relationship side of things. All right, I hope that's been an interesting lesson and a good reflection for us. Thank you. I'll pass the time back to John.